Chapter 3477. Ji Tianxing's words made Qinlan fall silent. Uncle Yan was filled with anxiety. He hurriedly sent a voice transmission to remind him. Young Master Lan, be careful of that guy's tricks. Both are low-grade king-grade divine artifacts, but the divine armor he made has 30 more runes than your divine sword. If the two of you compete like this, he can save nearly a day of time compared to you. Moreover, you haven't made many mid-grade king-grade divine artifacts. I'm afraid you don't have enough experience. Before Uncle Yan could finish, Qinlan waved his hand and interrupted him. Uncle Yan, not only have I helped my master and a few elders to make mid-grade king-grade divine artifacts 7 times, but I've also made them 3 times. And all of them were successful. If we're talking about experience, I'm quite confident. However, his divine armor has 130 runes, so it can save a lot of time. Seeing that he had listened to his advice, Uncle Yan didn't say anything else. Qinlan looked at Ji Tianxing and asked, "What do you want to bet with me?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Of course I want to bet some valuables such as precious treasures or divine artifacts. Do you dare?" Qinlan sneered and said, "Why wouldn't I dare? Tell me, what treasures do you want to bet?" Ji Tianxing smiled and said, "Your master is the left protector of the 100 Refinements ancient sect. I remember that he found a great opportunity on a star when he was exploring the universe. He dug up a huge piece of primordial jade essence, which is a treasure that has been growing for 100,000 years. Not only can it be used to heal injuries, forge weapons and refine pills, but it can also be refined to increase one's strength. He seems to have divided the primordial jade essence into a few portions. He gave one to the 100 Refinements ancient sect, refined one for himself and kept a few for himself. If I'm not wrong, you're the disciple he's most proud of, so he should have given you a portion, right?" Hearing this, Qinlan was instantly on guard, and his eyes were filled with caution. "How do you know all this? You're actually thinking about Master's primordial jade essence?" Qinlan exclaimed. This matter was extremely secretive. Even within the 100 Refinements ancient sect, not many people knew about it. 200 years ago, Qinlan had made a great contribution and brought glory to his master. That was why his master had secretly rewarded him with a primordial jade marrow. From then on, he learned of the origin and effects of the primordial chalcedony. It grew in the depths of the earth's core. Even though it was nurtured within a divine jade mine, it was like fine nectar that could be directly consumed and refined. After obtaining the primordial chalcedony, Qinlan had wanted to refine it to increase her cultivation. However, the left protector had repeatedly warned him that he had to wait until he reached the peak of the 6th degree realm and break through the shackles of the high-level divine king before using it. This way he would have even greater hopes of becoming a high divine king. That was why Qinlan had kept the primordial jade quintessence all this while and had not refined it yet. However, he did not expect that Ji Tianxing would actually guess that he had this item and even wanted to use it as a wager. Without any hesitation, Qinlan rejected him decisively. "No. I will never use it as a wager. Don't even think about it." With regards to his reaction, Ji Tianxing was not surprised at all. He merely smiled and said, "Why? The competition hasn't even started and you already think that you will lose? If that's the case, you might as well admit defeat and leave Changle City." "How can I admit defeat?" Of course, Qinlan was not convinced, but he would not be provoked. "However, I will not use the primordial chalcedony as a wager. You can give up now." "Haha, is that so?" Ji Tianxing raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "Since you want to bet, of course it has to be fair. My wager is as valuable as the primordial chalcedony. Don't you want to know what it is?" "What else can be as valuable as the primordial chalcedony?" Qinlan naturally did not believe him. He frowned and stared at Ji Tianxing. Uncle Yan also revealed a curious and doubtful expression as he waited for Ji Tianxing's reply. Ji Tianxing looked at the two of them and said with a playful smile, "The 100 Smelting Ancient Sect was founded more than 37,000 years ago by a peerless divine blacksmith, Xianxia. At that time, Xianxia was only obsessed with researching and crafting divine weapons. He did not have time to care about worldly affairs. In order to craft a peerless divine weapon, he spent thousands of years of effort and traveled across the universe. He searched every corner of the divine world and almost died. He was a true blacksmithing maniac and a lunatic for researching divine weapons. Fortunately, he had 4 successful disciples who used his name to create the 100 Smelting Ancient sect. After 3,000 years of development, the sect occupied a paradise and transcended the worldly affairs. It was with the power of the sect that Xianxia was able to gather the 2 sets of materials that he desperately needed. In the end, he successfully crafted a king-grade divine weapon, the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer. Uncle Yen and Qinlan were not unfamiliar with the legend of the 100 Smelting Ancient sect's founding ancestor. However, after listening to Ji Tianqing's story, the 2 of them were not annoyed. Instead, they were filled with pride. However, when they heard the words 100 Smelting Divine Hammer, their expressions turned cold and their eyes dimmed. Ji Tianqing continued, although Lian Qianqiu did not change his ways of being a blacksmith maniac and went to the universe to search for special materials, unfortunately he died in a black hole. However, the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer is indeed a peerless divine weapon. It has protected the 100 Smelting Ancient sect for more than 30,000 years. It's a pity that the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer was destroyed during the War of the Gods 1,000 years ago. It turned into dust and scattered in the void. Until now, the 100 Smelting Ancient sect has not been able to craft a similar divine hammer. This should be the 100 Smelting Ancient sect's greatest wish, right? Qinlan and Uncle Yen both furrowed their brows and nodded with solemn and serious expressions. You're right. This is indeed our sect's greatest regret. What are you trying to say? Don't tell us that you can craft a 100 Smelting Divine Hammer. That would be a joke. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said, although I can craft a 100 Smelting Divine Hammer, I don't have the time to spend thousands of years searching for materials. Uncle Yen and Qinlan could tell that something was amiss. Their expressions changed and their hearts jumped to their throats. What do you mean? You can craft a 100 Smelting Divine Hammer? That's impossible. Ji Tianqing said calmly, if I'm not wrong, the 100 Smelting Ancient sect has prepared all the materials to craft a divine hammer. Unfortunately, the only thing you lack is the blueprint of the divine hammer. The 100 Smelting Divine Hammer is extremely complicated and exquisite. None of you can see through it and no one can remember it. Naturally, you won't be able to craft it. After saying that, Ji Tianqing circulated his divine force and a ball of golden light the size of an egg flew out from his forehead. The dense golden light contained a vast amount of information. It was mysterious and profound. Ji Tianqing held the golden light in his hand and looked at Qinlan with a smile. He said, coincidentally, I know the blueprint of the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer. Qinlan, which one is more precious, the blueprint of the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer or your primordial jade essence? Hearing this, Qinlan was so excited that his blood boiled. He stared at the golden light with a burning gaze and could not help but swallow his saliva. Is there a need to ask? Even 10 primordial jade essences cannot compare to the blueprint of the 100 Smelting Divine Hammer. Chapter 3478. Qinlan was exaggerating. However, this was also within reason. To the 100 Refinement Ancient sect, the primordial jade marrow was just a precious treasure. However, the 100 Refinement Divine Hammer was different. It was the totem of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect, the divine weapon of the sect. It was the pride and reliance of all the disciples of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect. Ji Tianqing's words made Qinlan's blood boil. He was filled with excitement and anticipation. He wanted to take out the primordial jade marrow and exchange it for the blueprint of the divine hammer in Ji Tianqing's hands. However, that was impossible. Uncle Yen was also excited, but he was able to maintain his calm. Wait! He suddenly shouted coldly, interrupting Qinlan's fantasy. Young Master Tianqing, no one in the sect knows about the structure of the 100 Refinement Divine Hammer. How could an outsider like you know about it? Also, who can prove that the blueprint in your hands is real? Qinlan finally snapped out of his daze. He quickly nodded and asked, that's right. You can't just take out something and lie to me that it's the blueprint of the 100 Refinement Divine Hammer. You're taking this too lightly. Ji Tianqing smiled and said proudly, you'll know if it's real or fake when you see it. As he spoke, he waved his right hand and a golden ball of light appeared in front of Qinlan. Qinlan was stunned. He did not take the golden ball of light. Instead he asked Ji Tianqing, if this is really the blueprint of the divine hammer, aren't you afraid that we'll memorize it? Ji Tianqing smiled and said, take a look. If you two can understand it within 3 days, I'll admit defeat. As for memorizing it, don't even think about it. Even if everyone in the 100 Refinement Ancient sect came to see it, they wouldn't be able to memorize it. The most special thing about the 100 Refinement Divine Hammer is that other than Lian Qianqiu, no one else can memorize its blueprint. Qinlan was shocked into a daze, and a deep sense of reverence grew in her heart. Uncle Yen frowned and refuted, other than our sect's founder, no one else can memorize the blueprint. How can you memorize it? Doesn't this mean that your blueprint is fake? Ji Tianxing couldn't help but roll his eyes. Yen Shigao, with your IQ, it's hard for us to communicate. I didn't memorize this blueprint by memory. This time Uncle Yen understood. He said, you mean you have a blueprint of the hammer and you're copying it for us? Ji Tianxing just smiled and didn't want to bother with him anymore. Qinlan could not wait any longer. She extended her trembling hands and held the golden ball of light. She used her divine sense to read the information within. Instantly, his mind was flooded with information that was as deep as the ocean. It was to the extent that his entire body froze on the spot. It was as if he had fallen asleep and almost lost consciousness. After a long time, he finally calmed his mind and no longer dared to read the information in the light ball. Huff, huff, huff. Qinlan held the ball of light in her hand as she panted heavily. Her face was somewhat pale. It's too scary. Who would remember such a vast amount of information? I only saw about 10% of it and my mind almost fainted. It's too scary. Seeing that Qinlan couldn't help but exclaim, Uncle Yen looked expectant and eager to try. Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Zhen, Zhan Longxiang, and the others were also very interested. They were all shocked and expectant. They were all grandmasters and divine blacksmiths. They also wanted to see how mysterious and terrifying the blueprint of a peerless divine weapon was. Soon, Uncle Yen took the golden ball of light and immersed himself in it. When he took it, his reaction was even worse than Qinlan's. After only 10 breaths, he felt dizzy and lost control of his mind. As if drunk, he stumbled and fell in the main hall. This is unbelievable. He quickly got up from the ground and exclaimed excitedly, this is no ordinary divine weapon. It must be a peerless divine weapon. Although I only saw less than 10% of it, I dare say that only a top divine blacksmith can create such a divine weapon. At this moment, Uncle Yan's doubts were dispelled. He was completely convinced by the blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and took the golden ball of light back into his hand. Qinlan and Uncle Yen stared at the ball of light with reluctance. They really wanted to snatch it back. Ji Tianxing kept the golden ball of light and asked, you've seen the blueprint. Qinlan, do you want to bet or not? This time, Uncle Yen didn't have to say anything. Qinlan nodded without hesitation. Yes. Only a fool wouldn't bet. Although the primordial jade mara was precious, it wasn't as important as the blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer. Qinlan was already fantasizing that if he won the blueprint, he would become a hero of the 100 smelting ancient sect. At that time, he would definitely become the chief disciple. It was even possible that he would inherit the position of the sect leader in the future. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. His face turned red. Uncle Yen didn't forget to remind him, young Master Lan, don't forget the time. Qinlan immediately sobered up. He regained his composure and said to Ji Tianxing, young Master Tianxing, I agree to bet with you. However, to be fair, I have a request. Your divine armor already has 130 laws. My divine sword only has 100. Therefore, I want to start the refinement. You have to wait a day before you can continue. If you agree, we can start now. Jiang Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi were filled with indignation. They immediately retorted. Qinlan, can you be any more shameless? Young Master Tianxing can inscribe 130 laws. That's his ability. Young Master Tianxing has already competed once. Now, you want to continue the competition. You want to lead by a day? How dare you say that? Qinlan also felt that he was going overboard. He wanted to change the time to 20 hours. However, before he could say anything, Ji Tianxing nodded in agreement. All right, the rules are set then. Good. Qinlan was overjoyed. He quickly flattered, young Master Tianxing is indeed straightforward. You have the demeanor of a master. Since Ji Tianxing had agreed, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi had nothing to say. They could only shut their mouths. The two of them were filled with worry. They could only pray silently, hoping that Ji Tianxing would win. Soon the competition began. Qinlan was the first to open the divine cauldron. He placed the golden divine sword that he had previously refined into the cauldron and prepared to inscribe laws and restrictions. Ji Tianqing sat in the main hall with his eyes closed. He waited patiently. An hour later, Qinlan's divine sword had melted into a sword embryo. It was in a moldable state. He began to inscribe laws and restrictions. 2 hours later he had inscribed a law and stacked over 100 divine arrays and restrictions. As time passed he focused on casting the arts. He kept inscribing law and restriction after law. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing became even more anxious when they saw that he was progressing rapidly. However, Ji Tianqing kept his eyes closed. He did not look at Qinlan at all. He seemed especially calm. Chapter 3479. Unknowingly a day passed. Ji Tianqing followed the agreement and opened his eyes. He took out the 9 heavens divine cauldron and started refining. At this time, Qinlan had already engraved 27 laws and 270 array formations on his divine sword. Although compared to Ji Tianqing's divine armor, he was still short of 3 laws and 30 array formations. But he was filled with confidence and anticipation and did not feel worried at all. When Ji Tianqing started refining, he delayed for a breath of time and secretly took a look at Ji Tianqing. Unfortunately, Ji Tianqing was as calm and indifferent as ever. He could not see through him at all. Qinlan thought to himself, this guy is still pretending to be deep. I still can't see through him. Haha. But no matter how well you pretend, it's useless. You'll be exposed very soon. Previously, you refined continuously for 7 days and only rested for a day in between. There's no way you can maintain your peak state. Next, we still have to engrave more than 170 laws. It'll take at least half a month's time. Let's see how you can persevere. These thoughts flashed through his mind. Qinlan was no longer distracted and continued to focus on refining. The hall fell into silence. Ji Tianqing and Qinlan were both immersed in refining without any distractions. Uncle Yan, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Lin Jin, and Zhou Xian were all watching intently. No one made a sound, afraid that they would disturb Ji Tianqing and Qinlan. Without a doubt, Ji Tianqing and Qinlan were the 2 divine blacksmiths with the highest attainments in refining among them. In this competition, the 2 of them also gave it their all and brought out their trump cards. Everyone watched intently. While they were filled with amazement and admiration, they also broadened their horizons and learned a lot of experience in refining. Especially Lin Jin and Zhou Xian, their hearts were filled with agitation and excitement. To be able to watch 2 divine blacksmiths compete at close range was something that the 2 of them yearned for even in their dreams. Unknowingly, 3 days passed. Ji Tianqing and Qinlan were still focused on refining and did not slack off at all. But the further they went, the harder it was to refine. The speed also became slower. Qinlan had engraved 184 laws and over 1,800 formation restrictions on the divine sword. This speed was already his limit, surpassing all his previous refinements. He was confident and proud. He couldn't help but glance at Ji Tianqing. He had thought that Ji Tianqing would definitely look tired and slow down his speed. But he was disappointed. Ji Tianqing was as calm as ever without the slightest tiredness or sleepiness. His refining speed was as fast as ever. Of course, only Ji Tianqing himself knew that the Frost Moon divine armor he was refining already had 196 nomological laws. That's right, this godly armor was called Frozen Moon. A long time ago he had planned to forge 2 divine swords and a set of divine armor for Yunyao. The dual swords of Sun and Moon had been completed a long time ago. He was going to take this opportunity to refine the Ice Moon divine armor. Unknowingly, 12 days had passed. Qinlan's refining work was finally coming to an end. He had already engraved 290 nomological laws and 2,900 formation restrictions on the divine sword. In at most another 20 hours, the divine sword would become a mid-grade king-grade divine artifact. Such a fast speed was something Qinlan had never thought of in the past. Unknowingly, he had already surpassed him. His refining attainments had improved again. He was proud and self-satisfied. He couldn't help but look at Ji Tianqing opposite him. However, when he saw Ji Tianqing across from him, he was dumbfounded on the spot and was stunned. Because Ji Tianqing had just stopped and was casting spells. He raised his head and looked at him. Their eyes met. Ji Tianqing's expression was calm and indifferent. There was a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. But Qinlan seemed to have been struck by lightning. His body stiffened and his mind went blank. He actually already completed it? At this moment Qinlan's heart was in a mess. He felt that everything was unreal. He couldn't believe it, much less accept it. Ji Tianxing had actually completed refining a mid-grade king-grade divine artifact. This couldn't be real. A deep sense of defeat filled Qinlan's mind, causing his face to turn ashen. The confidence and pride that he was brimming with earlier vanished instantly, turning into disappointment and dejection. Right then, Uncle Yen reminded him with a voice transmission, "Young Master Lan, don't be in a daze. Continue casting your spells. Otherwise, the array formation will be messed up and the divine sword will collapse." Only then did Qinlan snap out of his daze. He hurriedly suppressed his distracting thoughts and calmed himself down before continuing to refine his weapon. He muttered internally, "I haven't lost yet. I can't be distracted. No matter what, I have to refine this divine sword. Even if I lose to him, I can't embarrass myself and I can't embarrass the sect." With that belief, Qinlan entered a focused state and continued to refine his weapon without any distractions. Everyone in the hall had already seen the outcome and knew the answer. However, no one disturbed Qinlan. They waited patiently for him to finish refining his weapon. Time seemed to have slowed down. After another 24 hours, Qinlan was finally done with her artifact forging. His divine sword was successfully engraved with 300 nomological runes and 3,000 array formations. However, when he finished refining his weapon and stopped, there was only a sigh of relief. There was no joy at all. "It's over," he muttered to himself and raised his head to look at Ji Tianxing, who was in front of him. Chapter 3480. Qinlan had nothing to say about the results of the competition, even though he had defeated Jiang Tianyi in the first round. However, after Ji Tianxing joined the battle, he won both battles. Everyone had seen the competition with their own eyes, and they were full of admiration for Ji Tianxing's skills. Qinlan had lost to Ji Tianxing, but he accepted it wholeheartedly and did not feel embarrassed. He could feel that the gap between him and Ji Tianxing was huge. However, this did not mean that he could accept the results. The blueprint of the 100 smelting divine hammer was extremely precious, and he and Uncle Yen had seen it with their own eyes. However, he regretted it now and hated that he had been blinded by the temptation. Only now did he understand why Ji Tianxing had used the blueprint, which was 10 times more precious than the primordial jade essence, as a bet. He was confident that he would win. From the start he had fallen into Ji Tianxing's trap. However, the bait was too tempting and he and Uncle Yen had no choice but to take the bait. When he thought about how the primordial jade essence, which was like his second life, was going to be given to Ji Tianxing, his heart ached and his breathing became hot. Soon the hall regained its silence. Ji Tianxing also kept the 9 heavens cauldron and ice moon divine armor, and looked at Qinlan calmly. Without waiting for Ji Tianxing to speak, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing said impatiently, "Qinlan, our Jiang clan has won this competition. You have to withdraw from the competition between the 2 blacksmithing geniuses. Also, you have to accept your loss. Qinlan, it's time for you to honor your bet." Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing's voices were filled with excitement and pride, and they looked at Qinlan with sympathy. Qinlan was ashamed and angry, but he could only endure it. With so many people watching, he could not go back on his words. After taking a deep breath and calming himself down, Qinlan said expressionlessly, "I have lost. According to the agreement, I will leave Perpetual Joy City today. Furthermore, I will not take the initiative to invite the 2 blacksmithing geniuses to join the 100 smelting ancient sect. However, those 2 geniuses are not willing to join the same sect, so you can only accept one at most. Do you think you have one?" Naive. Hearing Qinlan's words, the smiles on Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing's faces froze. That's right. Although Qinlan wanted to withdraw from the competition, the Jiang clan could only recruit 1 artificer. It was very likely that the other genius would take the initiative to join the 100 refinement ancient sect. Qinlan had only promised that she would not take the initiative to recruit any of them, but she had not promised to reject any of them. In the end, the 100 refinements ancient sect still got the upper hand. Thinking of this, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing's excitement instantly vanished. Seeing the 2 of them deflated and depressed, Qinlan revealed a smug sneer. He then turned to Ji Tianxing, cupped his fists and saluted, Young Master Tianxing, this king admires your attainments and skills in refining artifacts, and I accept my defeat wholeheartedly. However, the primordial chalcedony was too precious, so I didn't carry it with me. I've always left it in the sect. How about this? I'll go back to the sect and get it for you now. Qinlan lowered her head slightly, observing Ji Tianxing's reaction as she spoke. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and a cold smile appeared on his face. Jiang Tianxing's face was filled with anger as he shouted, Qinlan, are you trying to renege on your debt? This place is so far away from the 100 Refinements ancient sect, are you trying to buy time? Qinlan quickly waved his hands and smiled, you misunderstood. This king is upright, so how can I renege on my debt? If young Master Tianxing doesn't believe me, then follow me back to the sect to get it. Jiang Tianyi was also very dissatisfied and he said coldly, Qinlan, don't play these tricks. Do you think we can't see through your thoughts? Ha ha. Qinlan sneered with disdain and shrugged helplessly, you're measuring the heart of a gentleman with your own mean measure. If you don't believe me, then there's nothing I can do. Uncle Yan also quickly chimed in and said righteously, young Master Lan has already said that we won't renege on our debt. The primordial chalcedony will definitely be given to young Master Tianxing. However, young Master Lan didn't bring it with him, so he needs to go back to the sect to get it. How can you be so aggressive? You're shameless. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were speechless, and they could only suppress the anger in their hearts. They both suspected that the primordial chalcedony was on Qinlan, and that Qinlan was just trying to find an excuse to escape. However, without any evidence, they couldn't do anything to Qinlan. At this time, Ji Tianxing, who had been silent all this while, finally spoke. He looked at Qinlan calmly and said, how precious is the primordial chalcedony? You must treat it like your life, so how can you not bring it with you? You probably think that this king won't fall out with you and won't search or rob you. That's why you lied so brazenly, right? Having her thoughts exposed, Qinlan's body stiffened and her expression turned ugly. However, he immediately pretended to be angry and shouted righteously, young Master Tianxing, even if this king respects you as a senior, you can't slander me and frame me for no reason. Everything I said is true. If you don't believe me, you can follow me back to the 100 Refinements ancient sect. Before he could finish, Ji Tianxing raised his hand and interrupted him. He said calmly, there's no need to go through so much trouble. As long as you set up an altar and swear to the heavens that you don't have the primordial chalcedony, if you go against your oath, you're willing to be struck by lightning until you're reduced to ashes. Your divine Tao will be destroyed and you'll never be reincarnated. As long as you do that, this king will believe you. How about that? Qinlan's face turned green, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He would never dare to swear to the heavens in such a solemn manner. After all, one couldn't simply swear an oath. The heavens would fulfill it. Seeing that Qinlan was speechless, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing laughed mockingly and scolded him. Ha! Qinlan, are you feeling guilty? You don't dare to swear to the heavens, do you? You're still saying that you're not going to go back on your word? To think that you were acting so well just now. I didn't expect you to be exposed so quickly. Lin Zhen and Zhang Longxiang watched from the side. They didn't have the right to interrupt. However, there was a subtle change in their expressions. Their impression of Qinlan dropped even further. Actually, everyone already knew the answer in their hearts. Qinlan was so embarrassed that he wanted to make an oath on the altar. However, Uncle Yan pulled him back and advised him, young Master Lan, don't be rash. You can't simply swear such an oath. It's very easy for it to come true. The price is too high. After saying that, he glared at Ji Tianxing and said coldly, young Master Tianxing, you're being so overbearing. Don't you think you're looking down on the 100 Refinements ancient sect? Furthermore, you're a senior expert. How can you make things difficult for a junior? You even forced young Master Lan to swear such a vicious oath? Ji Tianxing smiled and said, you're right. This king really doesn't care about the 100 Refinements ancient sect. Cut the crap. If you don't hand over the primordial jade essence today, don't even think about leaving the gold laurel palace. Wonderful book house. He had just flown out of the hall and appeared in the sky above the manor when a white figure flashed in front of him. Ji Tianxing had blocked his way. Swish. Qinlan didn't hesitate and used his teleportation technique to move a few thousand miles away from Changle City. Unfortunately, the moment he used his teleportation ability, Ji Tianqing slashed out a blazing white sword light and sealed off the entire space of the gold laurel palace. The space around Qinlan froze. He was like a mosquito in ice, unable to move at all. Swish. A cold light flashed, and the pitch-black and cold sword of Burial of Heaven was placed against his neck. Qinlan's body stiffened and his expression turned ugly. He didn't dare to act rashly. The battle had just begun, but it ended abruptly just like that. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing, who had followed closely behind, held their divine weapons and looked murderous. However, when they saw that Uncle Yen had been knocked unconscious and Qinlan had surrendered, they were stunned and quickly put away their weapons. Soon Lin Zhen and the battle dragon elephant appeared in the courtyard. Qinlan was utterly humiliated in front of everyone. He was furious and humiliated to the extreme. He made up his mind and roared at Ji Tianxing, "I don't have the jade essence, but I do have a life." Ji Tianxing narrowed his eyes and exuded a bone-chilling aura. He asked in a low voice, "Are you sure?" Seeing that he was really angry and filled with murderous intent, Qinlan didn't doubt that he would really kill him. Thus Qinlan quickly corrected himself. I'm not sure. Senior, I was just joking." Chapter 3482. If it were anyone else, Qinlan would bet that they would be afraid of the 100 smelting ancient sect's reputation and would not dare to kill him. But Ji Tianxing was different. This guy had a mysterious background and was decisive in his methods. His strength was unfathomable. Most importantly, this guy looked calm and low-key, but in reality he was lawless and killed people like they were grass. Qinlan did not dare to risk his life, so he chose to admit defeat. Seeing Ji Tianxing's brows relax and the cold murderous aura dissipate, Qinlan heaved a sigh of relief. His back was already drenched in cold sweat, and his limbs were numb from the bone-chilling cold. Qinlan grinned and opened his spatial ring with trembling hands. He took out a ball of light. Swoosh. It was an ice-blue ball of light. It was dazzling and filled with divine power. Within the ball of light there was a ball of white water droplets. They were as bright as diamonds but also as clear as nectar. Even though they were separated by the ice-blue ball of light, everyone could feel the surging power of the white water droplets. Ji Tianxing observed for a moment. After confirming that it was a 100,000-year-old primordial chalcedony, he kept the Burial of Heaven. "You can get lost now." He kept the primordial chalcedony in his spatial ring and looked at Qinlan from the corner of his eyes. Qinlan glared at him viciously. He did not dare to say another word and quickly turned to fly away. But just as he flew 1,000 feet away, Ji Tianxing shouted again, "Take Yan Shangao away." Qinlan was stunned for a moment. Then he remembered that Uncle Yen had been knocked unconscious by Ji Tianxing and was still lying in the ruins. He was so embarrassed that he could not show his face. He flew back to the half-collapsed hall, carried the unconscious Uncle Yen, and quickly left the Gold Laurel Palace. After a while, the Gold Laurel Palace regained its peace. Only Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Lin Zhen, and Zhou Xian were left. Ji Tianxing did not care about what happened next. Jiang Tianyi looked at the two blacksmithing geniuses with a smile and said sincerely, "Lin Zhen, Zhou Xian, I already know about the two of you. Both of you are very talented and you are very lucky to have met Ninth Brother. If you join our Jiang clan, you will be able to learn more profound refining techniques. Only then will you have the chance to break through to the God King realm. Although this prince knows that there are some grudges between the two of you and that you don't want to coexist for the time being. But I have already thought of a countermeasure and arranged everything. If the two of you join the Jiang clan, I will let the two of you cultivate separately. You won't see each other and won't disturb each other." Jiang Tianyi knew it was futile. He was destined to only be able to recruit one genius and lose the other. However, he still wanted to give it a try and make a final effort. After persuading them earnestly, he looked at Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian expectantly and asked, "May I ask if you are willing to join the Jiang clan?" Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian looked at Ji Tianxing at the same time and nodded. "I'm willing." Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were both overjoyed and surprised. Seeing that they were one step closer to success, the two of them felt a little nervous. Jiang Tianxing asked carefully, "Even if the other party joins the Jiang clan, you don't mind?" Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian looked at each other and turned their heads away with contempt and disdain. The two of them looked at Ji Tianxing and nodded at the same time. "We don't mind." "What? Are you serious?" Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were stunned. They thought they had heard wrongly and were in disbelief. They didn't expect the two blacksmithing geniuses to change their minds and join the Jiang clan at the same time. This was definitely a pleasant surprise. Seeing the two brothers so excited and in disbelief, Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian nodded again to confirm. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were sure that they didn't hear wrongly and didn't see wrongly. They couldn't hold back their excitement and cheered. That's great. Both of you know the big picture. You are indeed talented. The Jiang clan needs geniuses like you. That's right. You can't throw away your bright future just because of a fit of pique. You have chosen to join the Jiang clan. This is the best decision you have made in your life. For many years to come, you will thank yourselves for making the right choice. The two brothers were excited and in high spirits. At this moment, Zhou Xian asked, "May I know what position Senior Tianqing holds in the Jiang clan? May I be so bold and shameless as to ask to be Senior Tianqing's disciple? Will I be so lucky?" Lin Zhen panicked when he heard Zhou Xian speak first. He quickly said, "I was about to say this, but Zhou Xian beat me to it. I Lin Zhen beg Senior Tianqing to take me in. Although I am mediocre and stupid, I dare not hope for Senior's love. But as long as Senior agrees, even if this disciple has to follow by your side as a servant, I'm willing to do so." Zhou Xian looked sideways and shouted angrily, "Lin Zhen, how can you be so shameless? I was the one who suggested it first." Lin Zhen smirked and raised his chin. "So what if you said it first? The key is who Senior Tianqing chooses." Zhou Xian said angrily, "Even if he chooses me, he won't choose you. You greasy-faced, hypocritical, cunning fellow." "Hee hee." Lin Zhen still smirked. "That's because you're too dumb and stupid. It'd be strange if Senior likes you." The two blacksmithing geniuses started arguing in front of everyone again. Ji Tianqing looked indifferent and did not take it to heart. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were dumbfounded. Chapter 3483. Ji Tianqing refused. The two blacksmithing geniuses had nothing to fight over. After all, this senior of the Jiang clan had a high status. His abilities and methods were too mysterious. Although the two of them had pretty good talent in artifact refinement, they were only two high divine lords. They definitely did not have the qualifications to discuss any conditions with a divine king powerhouse. Jiang Tianxing asked when he saw that Lin Zhen and the battle dragon elephant were silent. Their expressions and eyes were filled with disappointment and regret. "Then, are you still willing to join the Jiang clan?" As soon as he said it, he regretted it. Jiang Tianyi even glared at him and scolded him through voice transmission. "Are you a pig?" Jiang Tianxing wanted to slap himself. Luckily, Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian hesitated for a while and smiled bitterly. "Since we've agreed to join the Jiang clan, how can we go back on our words? Although we're not strong enough, we won't go back on our words. We'll definitely fulfill our promise." Although they did not meet their expectations, they could not take back their words. A man could not live without integrity. If the two of them couldn't even do this, how could they maintain their firm will and become divine blacksmiths that they would look up to for the rest of their lives? Not long after, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, and the rest left the Gold Laurel Palace. Previously, they had spent nearly 28 days in the Gold Laurel Palace to compete in refining weapons. But in reality, only 5 days and a few hours had passed in the outside world. When they left the Gold Laurel Palace, the sky was just starting to brighten. Jiang Tianyi looked at Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian and said, "We'll be leaving Chang'e City soon and returning to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven. You have 6 hours to pack your bags and say goodbye to your families. At noon we'll meet at the south gate of Chang'e City." Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian nodded to show that they understood. Then they bowed and left. After they returned home, Jiang Tianyi brought Jiang Tianxing and Ji Tianxing to the south gate of Chang'e City. The three of them bathed in the morning mist and breathed in the fresh air. They were in a good mood. Of course, the Jiang brothers were excited because they had won against the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect and obtained 2 blacksmithing geniuses. The reason Ji Tianxing was so happy was because of the primordial chalcedony. 100,000-year-old primordial chalcedony. Its effects were even more ferocious than high-grade king-grade divine pills. I have to find some time to refine it and break through to the 3rd heaven of the God King realm. After reaching the 3rd stage realm, you're not far from becoming a middle divine king. He calculated in his heart that after he became a middle-level God King, he would be able to sweep away all of the middle-level god kings. After a round of flattery, Jiang Tianxing raised another question. But, young Master Tianxing, although we know that the blueprint is fake, Qinlan and the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect are certain that it's real. This news will definitely spread to the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect. Those old fellows will definitely go crazy looking for you. No matter what method they use, they will definitely get the blueprint. Won't you be in danger then? Before Ji Tianxing could reply, Jiang Tianyi glared at Jiang Tianxing again. If young Master Tianxing isn't worried, what are you worried about? Moreover, young Master Tianxing is very powerful. He said that even Su Bailian has to call him senior. What's there to worry about? Moreover, young Master Tianxing wants to follow us back to the Divine Attraction Grotto. Those old fellows from the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect won't dare to barge into the Divine Attraction Grotto and snatch him from the Jiang clan. Jiang Tianxing pondered for a while and felt that it made sense. He nodded his head and said, "That's right. Then we have nothing to worry about." Unknowingly, the three of them had passed through Chang'e City and arrived at the South Gate. Originally, the three of them were going to wait for Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian at the South Gate. However, Ji Tianxing did not want to waste time. He entered Jiang Tianyi's palace first. He entered the secret room, took out the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda and entered the distorted space to cultivate. Although he said that he was going to cultivate in seclusion, he was actually going to use the time to refine the primordial jade marrow and break through to the 3rd level of the Divine King realm as soon as possible. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing could only wait at the city gate. It was still early. The two brothers had nothing to do, so they started to chat. "Seventh brother, how did you meet young Master Tianxing? How can there be such a coincidence? Oh right, what's his cultivation level? Logically speaking, he saved the Jiang clan 1,000 years ago. He should be a peak divine king, right? But why doesn't he look like one?" Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3484. Even though the Jiang clan did not have a peak divine king, but there were still a few high-ranked divine kings. But Jiang Tianxing observed Ji Tianxing for so long and did not see any signs or aura of a high-ranked divine king. Jiang Tianyi also frowned, recalling the scene of Ji Tianxing and Bai Feng fighting back then. He was very clear that Bai Feng only had 7th-level divine king realm strength, an existence at the bottom of the hierarchy among high-ranked divine kings. But Ji Tianxing fought with Bai Feng for so long. Not only did he not win easily, he was even injured, appearing a little wretched. This proved that Ji Tianxing's strength was inferior to Bai Feng's. Which was also to say that not only was he not a peak divine king, he was not even a high-ranked divine king. Because of this, Jiang Tianyi also suspected before in his heart and muttered for a long time. But apart from that, Ji Tianxing's performance did not have any problems. For a moment he was also somewhat at a loss. Seeing his reaction, Jiang Tianyi could not resist asking, "Seventh brother, this young Master Tianxing's strength, there wouldn't really be a problem, right?" Jiang Tianyi waved his hand and said, "Although there are some problems, I still can't figure it out until now. But don't pursue it either. Everyone has their own experiences, stories, and unspeakable troubles. Rashly probing into other people's past will incur enmity in light cases and enmity in heavy cases. You have to remember this point and never do it again in the future. Furthermore, young Master Tianxing has no ill intentions towards us and even helped us greatly. That's enough." Jiang Tianyi nodded half understanding and did not say anything else. Finally, 6 hours passed. The scorching sun rose into the sky. Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian arrived at the southern city gate one after another. Lin Zhen was escorted out of Perpetual Joy City by the Lin family, full of reluctance. Zhou Xian's situation was much bleaker. There were only a few junior brothers and sisters behind him. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianyi were both divine kings, high and mighty major figures. They naturally would not persuade the Lin family and Perpetual Joy Dao College people. The two of them watched coldly from the sidelines, silently watching Lin Zhen and Zhou Xian wave goodbye to their family and friends. Then Jiang Tianyi took out his palace and brought the two artifact refinement geniuses into the firmament, flying away. On the other side, Qinlan and Uncle Yan were on a divine ship, flying towards the southeast at lightning speed. Uncle Yan's injuries were not serious and he had already regained consciousness. However, his face was very gloomy, and his eyes flashed with terrifying killing intent. Qinlan's face was also dark. Her aura was ice-cold and she was silent. Although the two of them did not speak, their thoughts were the same. Chapter 3485. Unfortunately, the three divine envoys only cared about the results. They did not care about Bai Feng's condition. Was he tired? Could he persevere? At this moment they were all very excited and they looked as if they were determined to win. That's great. They are still in the Hengshan Empire and are not far from us. That's not right. They did not move for the past few days. Why did they suddenly move today? Could it be that they also have some divine ability that can detect our approach? That's impossible. They are not Bai Feng. How could they have such ability? No matter what, we are now in the Hengshan Empire and are very close to them. Didn't they escape towards the south? Let's just chase them towards the south. If there are no accidents, we can find them within 2 days at most. Alright, let's fly towards the south now. At the same time, inform the group of god kings behind us to catch up as soon as possible. The three divine envoys discussed for a while and quickly came up with a plan. Throughout the entire process no one looked at Bai Feng. Bai Feng forcefully propped up his nearly unconscious body and crawled up from the ground. He silently put away his command flag. Then he sat cross-legged on the ground and consumed a divine pill to recover his divine power. As for where Ji Tianxing and the others were and when they would be caught, he did not care at all. He only knew. He was very tired now. His entire body had been hollowed out and his mind was in a daze. If he did not properly recuperate, his foundation of the divine Tao would be destroyed. Not to mention that he would become a cripple, but his strength would also regress and affect his future cultivation. Of course, recuperating was not something that could be completed in 3 to 5 days. If possible, he really wanted to recuperate in seclusion for 3 to 5 years. Inside the 9 Heavens 10 Absolutes pagoda. Only a day and a half had passed in the outside world, but Ji Tianxing had already been in seclusion for 2.5 months. In these 2.5 months he only did one thing. Refine the primordial chalcedony. Although a 100,000-year-old primordial chalcedony was an excellent god-king grade material, if he spent some time and effort and added a few top-grade herbs, he could refine it into a high-grade king-grade divine pill. After consuming it, the effects would be excellent and its power would double. However, Ji Tianxing could not wait any longer. He had neither the time nor the means to find so many top-notch medicinal herbs. After all, wanting to gather those few medicinal herbs, they very likely had to search the entire boundless heaven continent. He might even have to enter the grotto heavens and blessed lands to make deals with the ancient clans. In fact, he even had to leave the firmament and enter the void to search for some of the top-tier materials. But the two oracles Zhang Ying and Ku Yun did not think so much. The two oracles sneered, looking confident and domineering. "Ha! Traitor, you're not too stupid. You know that you're on the path of no return, right? Little bastard, since you know that you're going to die, why are you still standing there? Kneel down and surrender." Although the two oracles had heard from Oracle Xianxia that Ji Tianxing's strength and methods were extraordinary, they must be careful. But they had been oracles for thousands of years and were used to being domineering. They could not change their attitude of looking down on the common people in a short time. At this moment, they only wanted to see Ji Tianxing helplessly and hopelessly kneel down and beg for surrender. But when Oracle Xianxia heard the words of his two companions, his face changed and his eyes flashed with deep regret and anger. "Damn it! You two bastards, can't you tell that he's just trying to trick us?" Of course, he only thought about it in his mind and did not dare to say it out loud. After all, Ku Yun and Zhang Ying had the same status as him. Moreover, he had begged Zhang Ying and Ku Yun to help. No matter how angry and dissatisfied he was, Oracle Xianxia did not know how to hold it in. He hurriedly changed the topic, trying to stall for time. But Ji Tianxing suddenly sneered and did not waste any more time. If that's the case, then you can go to hell." As he sneered, Ji Tianxing turned into a dazzling golden light and rushed toward Oracle Xianxia. Jiang Tianyi also put away his palace. Together with Jiang Tianxing, he unsheathed his divine sword and attacked. After all, Jiang Tianxing was only a young man in the 5th level of the Divine King realm. Among the 3 god envoys, the weakest 2 were at the 6th level of the Divine King realm. The strongest among them was God Envoy Zhang Ying, who had reached the 7th level of the Divine King realm. "Little bastard, hand over your life. Your time of death has come. Accept your fate." After the first exchange, Zhang Ying and Ku Yun both roared and launched a second round of attacks. However, this time the situation in front of them left them a little dumbfounded. Ji Tianxing held a sword in his right hand and a mysterious black tower in his left. After a few flashes of divine light, two figures appeared beside him. One of them was a handsome middle-aged God clan man in a long green robe. The other was a monster dozens of feet tall, whose body seemed to be made of stone. Moreover, these two figures who had suddenly appeared were both intermediate God kings. In an instant, Ji Tianxing's side had 5 God kings. Their combat power had increased by a large margin. Chao Qingyu and Yang, who had just joined the battle, did not say a word of nonsense. In fact, even without Ji Tianxing's order, the two of them charged fearlessly towards the 3 God envoys without any regard for their own safety. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were stunned for a moment. Then they unleashed their full strength and charged towards the 3 God envoys. As for Ji Tianxing, he did not wield the sword of burial of heaven to attack. Instead, he pointed the sword at the sky and shouted solemnly, "Sword come!" Instantly, in the distant sky, tens of thousands of stars lit up. Like a dense meteor shower, they rained down in a frenzy. The 3 God envoys felt great pressure and danger. Their hearts tightened. They looked up and saw that there were more than 28,000 star swords. Each star sword was thousands of feet long and contained hundreds of laws and divine power. They were extremely powerful and violent. Not good. Dodge. What kind of monster is this kid? He can summon the stars with a wave of his hand and turn them into tens of thousands of star swords? Damn it. In the end, we underestimated this guy. He seems to have become stronger again. At this moment, shock and fear flashed through the minds of the 3 God envoys, especially God envoy Xianxia. He felt it the most. He clearly remembered that Ji Tianxing's strength was not so terrifying a few months ago. Although Ji Tianxing could defeat him and severely injure him back then, it was a very difficult victory. But it was different now. Ji Tianxing's every movement was exuding a terrifying pressure that was enough to make him feel terrified and terrified. Wasn't this improvement too terrifying? Rumble. In the next moment, the 28,000 star swords slammed into the ground. The divine powers that the 3 divine envoys had unleashed were instantly shattered into pieces and turned into ashes. Not only that, but their divine power shields also collapsed and exploded into pieces. Most importantly, the 28,000 star swords did not disperse on the spot. They covered a radius of 20,000 miles and formed a huge sword net that sealed off the area. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sword light crisscrossed and intertwined. In the blink of an eye, a heaven-destroying sword array with a radius of 20,000 miles was formed. An unparalleled suppressive force enveloped the 3 God envoys, making their bodies stiff and difficult to move. Not only were they fearful, but their divine power was also greatly hindered and their combat strength plummeted. This made them feel hopeless. Zhan Ying and Ku Yun looked at each other and saw the horror in each other's eyes. This damned beast. How dare he form an array with a wave of his hand? How arrogant is he? How dare he set up a sword array to seal us 3 God envoys? Generally speaking, only a very powerful person would choose to use an array to fight against a large group of weak people. This way they could kill their opponents faster. If they were of similar strength, this method would not work. But Ji Tianxing had done it. One could imagine how confident Ji Tianxing was. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Soon the heaven-destroying sword array was activated and released more than 10,000 star swords to kill the 3 God envoys. Countless star swords formed a sword net that enveloped the 3 God envoys and forcibly separated them. Countless star swords formed a few hurricanes that wreaked havoc in the sword array. Many more star swords formed a huge sword that could split heaven and earth and slashed at the 3 God envoys. Suddenly, the 3 God envoys were in an extremely dangerous situation. They were forced to retreat in a fluster. Seeing this, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were shocked. The 2 brothers looked at each other and thought at the same time, "Oh my God! Young Master Tianxing is not only a top divine blacksmith, but also a master of arrays and swordsmanship?" Chapter 3488. Ji Tianxing's craftsmanship had already earned the respect and admiration of the Jiang brothers. Now that the battle had begun, his array and swordsmanship skills were equally unfathomable. The 2 brothers were even more shocked and even fearful. For a supreme being to be proficient in something and reach the pinnacle of it is already a lifetime achievement. But young Master Tianxing seems to be proficient in everything and has reached the pinnacle of it. Is there any justice in this world? In fact, the Jiang brothers were the direct disciples of the ancient clans. They were definitely one in a million talents. But after meeting Ji Tianxing, they realized how laughable they were. A powerhouse like Ji Tianxing was a true peerless talent. That's not right. He's not a young man, he's a senior. So he can't be called a genius, he can only be called a senior almighty. Thinking of this, the two brothers' thoughts became clear. Originally, they were still worried that they could not defeat the three divine messengers. But now, with a senior almighty watching over them, what was there to be afraid of? They just had to fight. Kill. Damn divine messengers, eat my sword. The two brothers' blood boiled as they waved their swords and attacked the three divine messengers. Swoosh, 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 bam, bam, bam. The divine sword radiance that blotted out the sky and the earth, as well as the dazzling divine arts, poured down in torrents, drowning the figures of the three divine envoys. Not only were the Jiang brothers working hard, but Chao Qingyu and Yang were also doing their best. Even Ji Tianxing was not idle. He waved his sword and used all sorts of swordsmanship skills to attack. After all, this was his first battle after breaking through to the third level of the Divine King realm. He also wanted to use actual combat to test how much his combat power had increased compared to before. Besides, the heaven-vanquishing sword formation was also suppressing the three divine messengers. There were also more than 10,000 giant swords that were constantly attacking and killing. The three divine messengers were in trouble. The battle had only started for less than 10 breaths, but the three divine messengers had already been beaten to a pulp. The first to be injured was Xianxia. He was the first to bear the brunt of Ji Tianxing's attention. Not only were there 3 sword wounds on his body, they were so deep that his bones could be seen and he was dripping with blood. Even his left arm was almost cut off by Ji Tianxing's sword. The second person injured was God Emissary Ku Yun. He was in a more miserable state. After his armor was shattered by the huge swords that filled the sky, there were a few more bloody wounds on his chest and back. Then his left hand was cut off by Jiang Tianyi. This was very humiliating. It was understandable that he was injured by Ji Tianxing. After all, Ji Tianxing had a record of severely injuring Celestial Aspect Emissary and was publicly acknowledged as their #1 enemy. But who was Jiang Tianyi? He had never heard of him before. He was a complete stranger. However, such a young god king with no presence had actually crippled Divine Emissary Withered Cloud's left palm. How could he not feel aggrieved? Thus, Divine Emissary Ku Yun was filled with grief and indignation. He no longer focused on Ji Tianxing and instead focused on Jiang Tianyi. If he did not kill this young god king, where would he put his face as a divine emissary? Divine Emissary Ku Yun crazily counterattacked Jiang Tianyi. This made Jiang Tianyi very uncomfortable and he was in a precarious situation. However, he was indeed a young talent of the Jiang clan. Even if he was suppressed by Divine Emissary Ku Yun's crazy aura, he would not be defeated so quickly. In this way, it was equivalent to him entangling Divine Emissary Ku Yun. Jiang Tianxing, Chao Qingyu and Yang targeted Celestial Aspect Emissary. None of the 3 were a match for Celestial Aspect Emissary. However, with the 3 of them working together with the heaven-punishing sword array, they naturally had the upper hand against Celestial Aspect Emissary. Celestial Aspect Emissary was beaten to the point of being unable to fight back. Moreover, his injuries continued to worsen. He was so aggrieved and angry that he wanted to vomit blood. As for the strongest Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner, he was naturally left to Ji Tianxing. That was then and this was now. Not long ago, Ji Tianxing was fighting with Bai Feng, who was also in the 7th stage, and it was difficult for him to hold his own. But now his strength had increased by several times. Not to mention Bai Feng, even Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner was not his match. Rise of the Sword. Sword breaking the 9 heavens. Heavenly Dragon slash. Starry River break. Ji Tianxing's left hand formed a sword seal while his right hand waved the burial of heaven. His posture was elegant as he continuously used one ultimate move after another. Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner was beaten until he was dizzy and had almost no strength to fight back. He could only defend with all his might. Even so, thousands of divine giant swords attacked him, making it impossible for him to defend himself. He constantly revealed flaws. Bam. All kinds of muffled sounds were heard as Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner's body kept bursting with dazzling blood. In less than 100 breaths, his chest and back were covered with wounds and dripping with blood. Not long after, Ji Tianqing took advantage of the moment when he was frantically dodging and used the Sword of Annihilation. This ultimate move borrowed the power of the Five Elements world and was one of Ji Tianqing's ultimate moves. Its power was extremely terrifying. Swish! The giant golden sword slashed down with a loud bang. Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner despaired. Kaboom! The divine light he sent out was shattered by the Sword of Annihilation. The shield formed by his divine power and the armor he wore were also shattered by the giant sword. Then he was also sent flying by the divine golden sword. Only a leg was left flying in the sky as blood splattered everywhere. Boom! Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner flew 300 miles and crashed into the ruins. A huge crater was smashed into the ground that looked like ruins and countless cracks appeared around it. Without a doubt, Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner was heavily injured and his strength had greatly decreased. Seeing this scene, Divine Emissary Xianxia and Divine Emissary Ku Yun, who were already in a dangerous situation, were filled with fear and despair. Even Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner, who was the strongest, was beaten so miserably. Wouldn't the two of them be doomed? That's right. Xianxia and Ku Yun were indeed doomed. Ji Tianqing took advantage of the moment when Xianxia God Emissary was filled with fear and distraction to teleport behind him. Yes, Ji Tianqing did not chase after Divine Emissary Shadow Executioner but instead charged toward Divine Emissary Xianxia. Of the three Divine Emissaries, he hated Divine Emissary Xianxia the most. All the pursuit, encirclement, and killing that had caused such a huge commotion were all because of Divine Emissary Xianxia. This guy was the main culprit. He must die. Space-time blade. Divine Emissary Xianxia only came back to his senses when Ji Tianqing appeared behind him. When Ji Tianqing waved the Sword of Burial of Heaven and thrust out a mysterious black and white sword light, it was too late for him to dodge. At this moment, Divine Emissary Xianxia's face was pale and his eyes were filled with anxiety and fear. This sword light that contained the laws of time and space seemed to freeze space and slow down the flow of time. Under everyone's gaze, it pierced through Divine Emissary Xianxia's head. Blood splattered everywhere. Divine Emissary Xianxia's head exploded and blood splattered all over the sky. Of course, there were also more than 20 quintessence shards that floated down from the sky. Divine Emissary Xianxia, who was at the 6th level Divine King realm, was killed by Ji Tianqing just like that. Instant kill at the critical moment. Chapter 3489. The headless corpse of the Stellar Aspect Ambassador fell into the ruins, accompanied by a sky full of blood. Not far away, the two god ambassadors Zhang and Ku Yun witnessed this scene with their own eyes and were stunned. Especially God Ambassador Zhang. Originally, Ji Tianqing attacked him fiercely as if he would not stop until he killed him. But only now did he realize that Ji Tianqing was creating a diversion. On the surface, it looked like Ji Tianqing was attacking him aggressively. But in reality, Ji Tianqing had been staring at the Stellar Aspect Ambassador. He was waiting. He was waiting for a fleeting opportunity to finish off the Celestial Aspect Messenger. And it was a one-hit kill. And now Ji Tianqing had done it. The Stellar Aspect Ambassador had fallen. This kid is so scheming. He's too despicable. The same thought flashed through the minds of God Ambassador Zhang and God Ambassador Ku Yun. Subsequently, the killing intent and fighting spirit that filled their hearts instantly dissipated like ice and snow under the scorching sun. Originally, the three god ambassadors could have held on for a while even if they were heavily injured. They could have held on for another 2 hours, waiting for the 11 god kings to arrive. As long as they waited for the 11 god kings, it would be worth it no matter how serious their injuries were. But their plans and illusions were shattered. After the Stellar Aspect Ambassador died, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and put away the divine spark fragment of the Stellar Aspect Ambassador. Then he waved the Sword of Burial of Heaven again and charged at the God Ambassador Zhang like a meteor. This time his aura was even more ferocious. The God Ambassador Zhang's fighting spirit disappeared, and so did his confidence. He was instantly terrified. He was already injured by Ji Tianqing and his aura was crushed by Ji Tianqing. Defeat was inevitable. Swish, swish, bang, bang, bang. Dazzling and eye-catching sword light poured down like a torrential flood. The god ambassador Zhening did not have time to think and could only defend with all his might. Unfortunately, he had blocked Ji Tianxing's ferocious attacks, but he had not been able to block the violent attacks of the heaven-destroying sword formation. At least dozens of divine giant swords struck him, causing him to spit out blood and tumble back. Shadow Executioner God Representative's injuries worsened once again, and his strength dropped drastically. After flying backward for 150 kilometers, his confidence was completely shattered. His eyes, which had been burning with a raging fighting spirit, had become dull and lifeless. The thought of retreating rose in his heart. No, we can't continue fighting like this. Ku Yun and I won't be able to hold on for so long. Before the reinforcements arrive, we will be killed by Tianxing. He had to escape. Xianxia is already dead. We have to survive no matter what. He knew. He had successfully escaped. He wouldn't die. Swish. The Shadow Executioner did not hesitate at all. After escaping from the heaven-destroying sword formation, he activated the space-piercing hairpin and cut through the night sky at his fastest speed, heading straight for the north. That was right. He fled to the north. It was in the opposite direction of Ji Tianxing and the others. At the same time, it was also where the 11 God Kings' reinforcements were coming from. Swish. In the blink of an eye, the space-piercing hairpin had flown 5,000 miles away from the heaven-destroying sword formation. At this time, Ji Tianxing, Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing and the rest had just reached the edge of the heaven-destroying sword formation. They had also passed through the gap in the sword formation and chased into the sky outside. Looking in the direction that the space-piercing hairpin had escaped in, Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing instinctively gave chase. They also exploded with their fastest speed, chasing after the space-piercing hairpin. Chao Qingyu and Yank were not idle either. They were also desperately chasing after him. However, Ji Tianxing stood in the sky and raised his hand to stop them. There's no need to chase. It's a waste of effort. You won't be able to catch up. Chao Qingyu's expression froze and he revealed a bitter smile. Yes. The divine weapon of Shadow Executioner should be a king-level upper divine weapon, right? Yank scratched his head and said unwillingly, "Are we just going to watch him escape like this? I can't accept this." Ji Tianxing was more indifferent. He said calmly, "After all, we are not peak God Kings. We can't control everything and we can't stop Shadow Executioner from escaping. Furthermore, looking at the direction that he escaped in, he should have other intentions. If I'm not wrong, they still have a large group of God King reinforcements rushing over from the north. If we chase after them, it won't be long before we bump into that group of God Kings." Naturally, there was no need to say the rest. If they bumped into that group of God Kings, it was obvious what the outcome would be. Chao Qingyu was inexplicably worried. He asked, "Young master, should we inform those 2 God Kings to stop chasing?" Ji Tianxing shook his head and said calmly, "There's no need. They will be back soon." Seeing that he was so confident, Chao Qingyu and Yank had nothing to worry about. As expected, Ji Tianxing had guessed correctly. After a short 30 breaths, the 2 brothers Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing returned, panting. Their eyes were somewhat dim and their expressions were filled with unwillingness and anger. Ji Tianxing, Chao Qingyu and Yank already knew the result, so they did not ask. However, Jiang Tianxing was filled with indignation. He could not help but curse, "Damn it. That guy escaped too quickly. If not for that superior king-level divine weapon, we definitely would not have let him escape." Jiang Tianyi did not say anything, but he smiled helplessly. Ji Tianxing comforted him, "It's okay. After this attack they won't be able to stop us for a long time." Jiang Tianyi thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Yes. They had a total of 3 divine messengers. Young Master Tianxing killed 2 of them. Divine Messenger Zhan Ying, who escaped, was also heavily injured. He won't be able to recover in a short period of time. In this way, the God Kings will be like dragons without a leader and will not be much of a threat. At this moment, Ji Tianxing suddenly turned his head and looked to the side of the heaven-destroying sword formation. When he saw a ball of divine light silently flying towards the east, his lips curled into a playful smile. I was only focused on chasing after the 3 divine messengers and forgot about him." Chao Qingyu, Yank and the Jiang brothers all turned their heads to look and discovered that within that ball of divine light was the exhausted divine king White Phoenix. The 4 of them immediately revealed gloating and malicious smiles. Yeah, we forgot about Divine King White Phoenix. Tisk tsk. I didn't expect that guy to hide outside the sword formation and not escape. I reckon he still doesn't know what happened inside the sword formation, and even more doesn't know that Ku Yun and Divine Messenger Xianxia are dead. As they spoke, everyone followed Ji Tianqing and flew towards that ball of divine light. Even though White Phoenix was a superior divine king and usually came and went like the wind as fast as the aurora. But it was different now. He was extremely weak and tired. His flying speed was extremely slow. Furthermore, he sensed that Ji Tianqing and the rest were not far away. He was afraid of alerting them and could only escape silently. In this way his speed was even slower. But even so he still could not escape from Ji Tianqing's palms. After a short 30 breaths, Ji Tianqing led Chao Qingyu Jiang Tianyi, and the rest to block Divine King White Phoenix's path. Chapter 3491. If you want to kill me, do as you please. Under the night sky, Divine King White Phoenix stubbornly raised his head and closed his eyes. He did not look at the expressions of the people around him. His pale and weak face was filled with arrogance and unyieldingness. Even though he knew that he was destined to not be able to escape tonight. If he fell into Ji Tianqing's hands he would definitely die. However, he was an upper-level divine king, a renowned ruler of a region. Even if he were to die, he would die with an unyielding spirit and an air of arrogance. He would not bow and scrape. However, the butcher's knife did not descend as he expected. Jiang Tianyi, Jiang Tianxing, Chao Qingyu and Yang surrounded him. They crossed their arms and looked on coldly. Their expressions were somewhat mocking but no one made a move. Ji Tianqing also looked at him coldly but did not make a move. After a short silence, Divine King White Phoenix opened his eyes. He looked around and then his gaze fell on Ji Tianqing. Why didn't you kill me? Ji Tianqing looked at him and raised his eyebrows. He asked, why should I kill you? Do you want to die? Bai Feng frowned and a self-mocking cold smile appeared on his face. He said in a low voice, I served the 3 divine envoys and followed them to kill you. Don't you have the right to kill me? Ji Tianqing smiled and shook his head lightly. He said, strictly speaking, you and I don't have any deep grudges. When we first fought, you were only following the orders of Divine Envoy Xianxia. This time you were just watching the battle and did not attack me at all. To be more precise, you're just leading the way. Leading the way? Bai Feng frowned again and his expression was a little strange. Ji Tianqing maintained his smile and looked at the third eye on his forehead. He said, if not for the Phoenix clan's eye of annihilation, how would the 3 divine envoys know where I was? If not for your guidance, they would still be guarding the Heaven Dragon Pass in the Red Dragon region. How could they appear here? Bai Feng's tightly furrowed brows relaxed. Her face was filled with vigilance and wariness as she asked, so, you didn't kill me because of my divine eye of annihilation? You want me to pledge my loyalty to you and work for you? Ji Tianqing shook his head and said blandly, the Annihilation Divine Eye is indeed a special inheritance of the Phoenix kind and I can't have it. But if I want to cultivate the Divine Eye secret technique, there is an eye technique even more miraculous than the Divine Eye of Annihilation. As for your loyalty, I won't force you. It's all up to you. I won't kill you. Firstly, there is no deep hatred between us. Secondly, you are a disciple of the Phoenix clan. Bai Feng frowned again. After pondering for a moment she asked, are you afraid of the Phoenix clan's power? No. You even dared to kill the oracle and offend the God Emperor. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner hurriedly rushed forward, waving his arms as he shouted in a low and hoarse voice. The God King controlling the divine worship immediately discovered Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner and recognized him. Thus, the divine worship quickly decelerated and stopped in midair. Swoosh. Swish swish swish. After the cabin door of the divine ship opened, 10 divine kings appeared one after another and flew to the side of Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner. Seeing Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner in such a miserable state, all the divine kings were stunned, their faces filled with disbelief. Sir Messenger, what happened to you? Shadow Executioner, how did you suffer such heavy injuries? What about the other 2 divine envoys? Why are you alone? What the hell is going on? Are we late? The 10 divine kings were shocked, anxious, and confused. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner looked around and saw that no one was gloating, mocking, or joking. Only then did he relax slightly. He waved his hand and said in a low voice, "This is not the place to talk. Let's return to the divine worship first." The divine kings hurriedly nodded in agreement. "Yes, yes, yes. Sir Messenger, quickly return to the divine worship to rest. Sir Messenger, please." Soon, everyone returned to the main hall of the divine worship. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner sat at the head and took 2 king-level divine pills, silently circulating his energy to suppress his injuries. The 10 divine kings all stood in the main hall, looking at him with concern. 15 minutes later, Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner's injuries stabilized. He then said, "This envoy and 2 other divine envoys stopped those traitors at the southern border of the Hongshan Empire. I didn't expect that those traitors had the help of the Jiang clan and were so powerful. We fought a great battle and injured those traitors and the Jiang clan disciples. Unfortunately, the 2 divine envoys Xianxia and Ku Yun were killed by the traitor Tianxing." Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner's voice was low, filled with pain and anger. When the 10 divine kings heard this, they were stunned. Their faces were filled with shock and disbelief. The 2 divine envoys were killed? How is this possible? The strength of those renegades is actually formidable to such an extent? It's over. The 2 divine envoys were killed. Who else can kill those traitors? Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner, why don't you send an order to Heaven Dragon Pass and gather all the divine kings so that we can work together to kill those traitors? Yes. Since those renegades are so powerful, we have to work together. Only then will we be absolutely safe. Every divine king felt a strong sense of danger. They were nervous and worried. Before they came, everyone was full of confidence. Now they were not confident and were filled with fear. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner thought for a moment and nodded. Those traitors will definitely continue south. With our current manpower, we may not be able to kill them. I will immediately send a message to Heaven Dragon Pass and gather all the divine kings. Even if the 2 divine envoys were sacrificed, we cannot give up on killing them. No matter what, we must kill those traitors to appease the souls of the 2 divine envoys. The 10 divine kings nodded in agreement. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner frowned and thought for a moment. He waved his hand and said, "All right, everyone leave. I need a secret room." The divine kings quickly left. One of them came forward and arranged a secret room for him. After a moment, Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner entered the secret room to heal his injuries. All the divine kings left. The secret room was dimly lit and silent. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner was not in a hurry to heal. He first took out a communication jade slip and sent an order to Heaven Dragon Pass. Then he frowned and muttered to himself, "This assassination not only mobilized more than 30 divine kings, it also alarmed more than 20 regions. Xianxia and Ku Yun are dead. There is no news of divine king Bai Feng. She was probably killed by those traitors." This matter not only implicated the Feng clan, but also the Jiang clan's disciples. Such an important matter will probably spread to the various regions very quickly. There is no way to hide or cover it up. It seems that I can only report the truth to His Majesty the God Emperor and let His Majesty the God Emperor make the decision. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner came to this decision after careful consideration. Before this, he had the same idea as Ku Yun and Divine Envoy Xianxia. A traitor like Ji Tianxing had appeared in the Boundless Heaven continent. They wanted to kill Ji Tianxing and the others before the matter got out of hand. Only then could they answer to His Majesty the God Emperor and not show their incompetence. But now, the matter had gotten out of hand and was beyond their ability to handle. Not to mention the region masters, even Xianxia and Divine Envoy Ku Yun were killed. He did not dare to hide it anymore. He could only ask Azura God Emperor. Chapter 3493. After thinking for a while, Shadow Executioner God Emissary took out a communication jade slip. He reported the cause, process and result of the entire matter in detail, including the 2 Jiang clan disciples participating in the battle and the disappearance of White Phoenix Divine King. As a god emissary who patrolled the world, he naturally knew the strength of the 18 ancient clans, as well as the relationship between the ancient clans and the God Emperor. This level of conflict and confrontation was not something he could decide. It had to be handled by the God Emperor. Of course. Shadow Executioner God Emissary temporarily did not have the qualifications to directly send a message to the Azura God Emperor. This communication jade slip was for the patrol commander. That's right. The 49 patrol commanders were directly under the 2 commanders. The 2 patrol commanders were the Azura God Emperor's trusted aides and right-hand men. Only they had the qualifications to meet the God Emperor. Especially Vice Commander Jin Shuang, who guarded the God Emperor's palace and the living being altar all year round, receiving news from the various regions. Whoosh! A golden light flashed. The communication jade slip flew out of the divine ship and disappeared into the sky. After sending the message, Shadow Executioner God Emissary let out a sigh of relief. He looked at the sky outside the window and muttered to himself, "Although the God Emperor will definitely severely punish me when he finds out about this matter will also become a failure in my life. But Ku Yun and Xianxia were sacrificed. Only I survived. This is already a great fortune. As for those traitors, their time of death has come. Soon everything will be over." After saying this, Shadow Executioner God Emissary finally felt relieved. He collected his thoughts and began to heal himself. In the center of the boundless heaven continent, there was a blessed land that ordinary people didn't know about. It was located high up in the sky. This was a small world and also the most sacred and dignified place in the boundless heaven continent. Because this was the Azura God Emperor's cave residence. The famous God Emperor's palace that only existed in legends was within this blessed land. At this time, Vice Commander Jin Shuang was guarding the living being altar as usual, waiting to receive news from the various regions at any time. For the past few hundred years he had been repeating the same routine. It was dull and tedious. Fortunately he could still cultivate while guarding the living altar. He only needed to deal with it when there was news from the living being's altar. However, today was different. While he was cultivating, nothing happened to the sage's altar. However, a beam of golden light descended from the sky. Shwa! The golden light dissipated, revealing a special communication jade slip. Jin Shuang glanced at it and recognized that it was the special communication jade slip used by the inspectors. Which patrol envoy sent this? Could it be that there's a problem in one of the domains? This thought flashed through Jin Shuang's mind. She reached out and picked up the jade slip, reading the information inside. A moment later he finished reading the contents of the jade slip and was stunned. His expression became dignified and angry, and his eyes flashed with a biting cold killing intent. Damn it! Zhang Ying is such an idiot. How could he wait until now to report such a big incident? Jin Shuang's fists were clenched so tightly that creaking sounds could be heard. Her entire body was bursting with anger and killing intent. If the Shadow Executioner was in front of him, he would definitely beat him up. However, Jin Shuang took a deep breath and quickly suppressed the anger in her heart. He realized the seriousness of the matter and didn't dare to act on his own. He hurriedly flew to the God Palace 100 li away. 100 breaths later, he knocked on the door of a secret room and saw a middle-aged god race wearing scarlet red armor. He was tall and sturdy and had a domineering aura. "Lord Commander, I am very sorry to disturb your secluded cultivation. However, just now the Shadow Executioner reported a very serious matter to me. You must take a look." Jin Shuang looked at the cold and dignified middle-aged god race sitting on the god jade throne. He bowed and said in a serious tone, "This middle-aged god race wearing scarlet red armor was the commander of the 49 inspectors, one of the Azura God Emperor's right-hand men. His strength had long reached the 9th layer of the Divine King realm, Qian. Although there was only a difference of one word between the commander and the deputy commander. However, there was still a huge gap between their statuses. Otherwise, Qian wouldn't be able to freely stay in the secret room and cultivate. On the other hand, Jin Shuang could only guard the living being's altar year after year. Qian didn't speak. He only nodded and reached out to take the communication jade slip from Jin Shuang. His divine sense entered the jade slip. The Shadow Executioner's low voice immediately sounded in Qian's mind. After hearing a few words, Qian's brow furrowed and his face became as cold as ice. After a while, Qian finished listening to the Shadow Executioner's report and retracted his divine sense. His face was cold and his body emitted a cold killing intent. He sneered, "In almost 1,000 years, there has never been such a big matter. A few daring traders wantonly killing those domain lords is one thing. But even the Jiang clan of the god attraction Grotto Heaven is involved? Haha, those 18 ancient clans, after keeping a low profile for 1,000 years, are they finally going to bare their fangs? Chapter 3494. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. The Palace of Heavens had long left the Hengshan region and crossed over a region. Ever since that battle and the death of the two divine envoys, the journey had been peaceful. No one dared to intercept the Palace of Heaven's will. Even though the journey was peaceful, Jiang Tianyi did not dare to be careless. He knew that divine envoy Shadow Executioner would not let the matter rest. He would definitely gather more divine envoys and divine kings to intercept the Palace of Heaven's will. Therefore Jiang Tianyi was always tense. He only had one goal now. That was to return to the divine attraction Grotto Heaven as soon as possible and bring Ji Tianxing back to the Jiang clan. As long as he completed this mission, he would have no more worries. As for whether Ji Tianxing's killing of the two divine envoys would incur the God Emperor's wrath and be personally hunted down by the God Emperor, this was not in his consideration at all. In any case, he was like all the other Jiang clan disciples. He did not have much respect for the Azure God Emperor. At the same time, Ji Tianxing had been cultivating in seclusion in the distorted spacetime for 2 years. In these 2 years he had refined Xianxia and divine envoy Ku Yun's divine spark fragments. Not only had his skills improved greatly, but his strength had also increased by 2 times. The number of divine Dao laws he had mastered had also increased by a few dozen. He was not far from 500. After refining the divine spark fragments, Ji Tianxing did not remain idle. He continued to cultivate the heaven-punishing divine art. As his strength increased, his understanding of the heaven-punishing divine art also deepened. He had already thought about how to cultivate the heaven-punishing divine art after breaking through to the intermediate divine king level. His current goal was to recover to the 4th level of the divine king realm before entering the divine attraction Grotto Heaven. Once he became an intermediate divine king, it would be easier for him to do things after entering the Jiang clan. On the other side, Yank was also cultivating in seclusion under the Bloody Flame sacred tree. After 2 years of recuperation, his injuries had long since recovered. Now he was cultivating diligently to improve his strength. Not only Yank but Yunyao, Jiku, Bailong and the others were also cultivating under the sacred tree. Everyone's strength and realm were constantly increasing. Only Yunyao was in an awkward situation. She had long reached the peak of the God Monarch realm, but she still could not see any hope of breaking through to the God King realm. While this made her feel depressed, it also confirmed Ji Tianxing's conjecture. Most likely she would need to fuse with the 7th divine pearl before she could break through to the God King realm. The first 2 months of their journey were peaceful and quiet. Their strength was at the 6th level of the God King realm, but they were in peak condition only a step away from the High God King realm. Other than these 4 God Kings, Jiang Tianyi's gaze landed on the 5th person. It was a young god race expert wearing a white robe, his hair tied up in a bun. He looked very handsome. His appearance was very familiar, but his face was filled with a mocking sneer, and his eyes flashed with killing intent. The 6th person was beside the young god race expert. Jiang Tianyi was also familiar with him. When he saw this person's face, Jiang Tianyi was stunned. Qinlan, Yanchangao, why is it you? Without a doubt. The 6 god kings who appeared to block Tianyi Palace were all experts of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect. Based on their attire and appearance, Jiang Tianyi immediately guessed their identities. Left Guardian Qin Dong, 2nd Elder Su Zhang, 6th Elder Gu Shi, and 7th Elder Lu Qingsong of the 100 Refinement Ancient sect? Without much thought, Jiang Tianyi immediately guessed the reason. After Qinlan and Yan Shangao escaped from the Gold Laurel Palace, they must have headed south towards the 100 Refinement Ancient sect. Along the way, Qinlan must have sent a message to his master Qin Dong to explain the situation. When Qin Dong heard that his disciple had been humiliated, he was naturally furious and brought the 3 elders to seek revenge. In the past half a month, Jiang Tianyi had always felt that someone was spying on them. Without a doubt, it was related to the 100 Refinement Ancient sect. As expected, Qinlan stared at Jiang Tianyi with a cold smile and said mockingly, Jiang Tianyi, I didn't expect you to have such good eyesight to recognize the left guardian and the elders. Since that's the case, you should know our motive, right? Jiang Tianyi snorted and said with disdain, "Back in the Gold Laurel Palace we had a fair fight. Since you lost, you had to fulfill the bet. I didn't expect you to be so despicable as to ask your elders to seek revenge. Qinlan, you don't deserve to be a disciple of the clan." Hearing those words, Qinlan frowned deeply and her expression turned gloomy. But before he could say anything, the left guardian Qin Dong, who was the leader of the group, shouted coldly in a dignified tone, "Junior of the Jiang clan, it's not up to you to judge my disciple. It was the Jiang clan's elders who disregarded their status and humiliated my disciple first. Today you must give me an explanation. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving this place." Chapter 3495. Qin Dong's anger and protectiveness were evident at this moment. He didn't care who was right or wrong. He only knew that his most valued disciple Qinlan had been humiliated by the Jiang clan. Furthermore, he had lost the primordial jade marrow that he had given him. To Qinlan this was a huge loss. To Qin Dong it was also a huge humiliation. Therefore he definitely couldn't take this lying down. He had to get back at them. Most importantly, Qinlan repeated Ji Tianxing's words to him word for word. "Yan Shangao, not to mention an old man like you, even if your sect leader Su Bailian was here, he wouldn't dare to be impudent to this king. Who am I? Strictly speaking, the two of you have to call me old master." It was this sentence. Back then it had shocked Qinlan and Yan Shangao. At the same time, it had also made them very confused and humiliated. Qinlan couldn't tell if this sentence was true or false, so he told Qin Dong. After Qin Dong heard it, he was furious and filled with killing intent. An unknown young man was actually so arrogant? He actually dared to call himself an elder of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect and didn't even put the sect leader in his eyes? This was simply too ridiculous, too lawless. No matter what, Qin Dong had to find that arrogant fellow and punish him severely. Otherwise, where would the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect's face go? It was because of these reasons that Qin Dong personally brought the three elders to intercept Jiang Tianyi and the rest. Swoosh. Qin Dong used his eyes to signal, and the three elders Qinlan and the rest quickly dispersed. Everyone surrounded the Palace of Heaven's Will with a murderous aura. Jiang Tianyi stood at the entrance of the palace and glared at Qin Dong. He asked in a low voice, "Protector Qin, what are you trying to do? Don't forget I'm the 9th young master of the Jiang clan. If you do anything to us, it's a declaration of war against the Jiang clan. The alliance and agreement between the clans will also be broken because of you." Jiang Tianyi was neither servile nor overbearing. His tone carried anger and warning. Qin Dong didn't think much of it. He stroked his beard and sneered. What bullshit 9th young master. In front of me he's just a brat who's still wet behind the ears. I will naturally not break the agreement of the clan alliance. After all, I won't kill you today. I'm just here to teach you a lesson on behalf of the Jiang clan and make you pay the price you deserve." "What do you mean?" Jiang Tianyi shouted coldly as he clenched his fists. Qin Dong was still stroking his beard. His seemingly thin and old body emitted a domineering aura that soared into the sky. "Simple. Hand over the 2 weapon refinement geniuses and bow to Qinlan in apology. Then I'll spare you." Jiang Tianyi's body trembled and then he sneered. After talking for so long, you're here to snatch people away." Chapter 3496. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing teamed up to face Qin Dong. Jiang Tianyi didn't have time to ask Jiang Tianxing why he was here. He only knew. If he couldn't block Qin Dong's attack, he and Jiang Tianxing would be in trouble. Even if they didn't die, they would be severely injured. In the next moment, dozens of dazzling sword lights clashed with the giant palm, creating a deafening explosion. It was like thunder echoing through the sky. The dazzling sword lights collapsed and more than half of the giant palm was shattered. Tens of millions of fragments of divine light shot out in all directions like a violent storm. Jiang Tianyi and Jiang Tianxing were both hit by the palm. With a muffled sound, the two of them flew back in a sorry state. While he was still in midair, he opened his mouth and spat out a scarlet arrow of blood that scattered across the sky. Plop, plop. Then the two brothers crashed into the palace at almost the same time. After rolling dozens of times, they fell to the ground. Without a doubt, they were both injured by Qin Dong. However, Jiang Tianqing's injuries were more serious. Not only did his divine sword fly out of his hand, his right arm was broken and there was a huge hole in his chest. He was covered in blood and blood was foaming from his mouth and nose. He was on the verge of losing consciousness. On the other hand, Jiang Tianyi was only dizzy. His right arm was broken and his strength was greatly reduced. The blood in his body kept churning. He struggled in the air for a while before flying back to the palace. As for Jiang Tianxing, he fell down from the sky and smashed into the ruins with a loud thud, raising a cloud of dust into the air. This scene made Jiang Tianyi's expression extremely ugly. His eyes were extremely serious. The elders of the 100 Refinement Ancient Sect, Qinlan and Yan Shangao, all sneered. Qin Dong looked down at Jiang Tianyi from above and said in an indifferent tone, "Brat, don't put up any more resistance. It's meaningless. Hand over the 2 blacksmithing geniuses and apologize to Qinlan. Also, hand over the human youth called Tianxing and this matter will be over." Jiang Tianyi was still unwilling to admit defeat. He looked up at Qin Dong and said firmly, "I said don't even think about it." Qin Dong sneered. "I said I wouldn't kill you, but since you're so stubborn, I don't mind crippling you and sending you back to the Jiang clan like a dead dog." To Qin Dong this wasn't a difficult thing to do. Plus he definitely had the guts to do it. However, he didn't expect Jiang Tianyi to just stare at him. Jiang Tianxing struggled to crawl out of the deep pit in the ruins. His face was covered in blood as he roared, "Qin Dong, you damned old man. As the left protector of the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect, you actually personally attacked us juniors. Do you think our Jiang clan has no one?" It was as if they had returned to the past, where they were surrounded by mountains of corpses and seas of blood. They remembered the fear of being dominated by that young man and that sword. What the hell? Wasn't that person already dead? How could his voice appear again? Inside and outside the palace, the only person who could still maintain her composure was Qinlan. He stared blankly at the Palace of Heaven's Will, at the terrified Qin Dong, and then at the 3 elders beside him. He couldn't understand why his master and the 3 elders would have such a reaction. They seemed to be terrified. But what were they afraid of? Thinking up to this point, Qinlan could not help but look at Yan Shangao behind her, wanting to ask him about it. However, he realized that Yan Shangao was also trembling. His face was ashen and his expression and eyes were filled with fear. In fact, he seemed to be in a daze and his mind was not clear. "Uncle Yan, what's going on? That voice just now seemed to belong to that bastard Tianxing. Why did you?" Yan Shangao stared at the Palace of Heaven's Will with his eyes wide open. His voice trembled as he roared crazily, "It's him. It's his voice. He's back. This is impossible. He clearly died a long time ago. How can he still be alive? Why didn't I notice it before? Why is it him?" Seeing how terrified Yan Shangao was and how he was howling hysterically, Qinlan suddenly understood something. He suddenly remembered. More than 1,100 years ago he left the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect under his master's orders to carry out a mission in the secular world. He left for 3 years. When he completed his mission and returned to the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect, he saw that the entire grotto heaven was in a mess. There were ruins and smoke everywhere. The once glorious 100 Refinements Ancient Sect was only left with broken walls, countless corpses and blood stains. The number of people in the sect had decreased by more than half. The once high-spirited prodigies, the high and mighty elders, and the protectors had all become silent and dejected. Qinlan only knew then. All of this was because of that white-robed young man. As for his title, there were only 2 words. Hey. At that moment, Qinlan saw the reactions of Yan Shangao, the 3 elders and his master and instantly understood. It's him. It's that Kenshin from back then. No. How is this possible? Qinlan was also dumbfounded. He stared at the Palace of Heaven's Will with his mouth agape. He could not help but exclaim softly. At that moment, in the depths of the Palace of Heaven's Will's main hall, that cold and majestic voice sounded again. If the 100 Refinements Ancient Sect is still the same as before and only knows how to bully the weak, then there's no need for it to exist. Qin Dong, Su Zhang, Gu Shi Lu Qing Song. All of you are full of evil. You should atone for your sins with your deaths. As this voice sounded, An invisible pressure and killing intent surged out from the depths of the main hall. It was as if a peak god king had descended from the heavens and earth. That bone-chilling killing intent caused everyone's blood to freeze and their hearts to stop beating. It was as if they were enveloped by death. If they had only heard his voice a moment ago and still had doubts about his identity, they would have found it hard to believe. But at this moment their last doubts were dispelled. They were absolutely certain. That's right. It was him, Kenshin. That terrifying fellow had returned. At this moment Qin Dong, Su Zhang and the others couldn't help but tremble. Their minds were completely swallowed up by fear. Without any hesitation, they instinctively turned around and flew into the distance with ashen faces. Run. Run. Don't kill us. Pretend we never came. Lord Kenshin, spare us. Qin Dong, Su Zhang and the others all shouted in different voices. But they all fled the Palace of Heavens will as fast as they could. In the blink of an eye they had all fled without a trace. This included Yan Shangao and the terrified Qinlan. Lying in the corner of the main hall, Jiang Tianyi, who was on the brink of unconsciousness, was also stunned. How could this be? Why did young Master Tianxing's voice change? Qin Dong and the people from the 100 Refinements ancient sect didn't even see him. They only heard his voice. Why are they so scared? While he was puzzled, he suddenly remembered that Gushi had shouted, "Lord Kenshin, spare us." Thinking of this, Jiang Tianyi was stunned. Lord Kenshin? It's really him. He's the benefactor of the Jiang clan. I didn't do anything wrong. Incomparable joy surged into Jiang Tianyi's heart. His vision turned black as he fainted. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3498. Before Jiang Tianyi fainted, the last thing he saw was the white-robed black-haired Ji Tianxing walking out of the palace. Then he completely lost consciousness. Swoosh. Ji Tianxing emerged from the darkness in the depths of the palace. With a single step he crossed 1,000 feet and appeared in the middle of the palace. He glanced at the unconscious Jiang Tianxing and Jiang Tianyi but didn't try to save them. Instead he formed a seal with both hands and quickly activated the array under his feet. Swoosh. 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 In an instant, the thousands of divine array patterns on the floor of the palace lit up with a dazzling light. After the divine array was activated, the palace's door closed. In the next moment, the entire Palace of Heavens will emitted a 5-colored divine light. It tore through the sky like a sharp shuttle and flew toward the southwest. Swoosh. Under Ji Tianxing's control, the palace was like a divine ship, and its speed was raised to the maximum. In just a few seconds, the palace flew 100,000 miles and disappeared into the depths of the sea of clouds. At this moment, Qin Dong, Su Zhang, Qinlan, and the others were crazily flying in the sky tens of thousands of miles away. The Palace of Heavens will flew towards the southwest while they fled towards the southeast. The distance between the two sides had increased a long time ago. Of the 6 people, some were strong, some were weak, some were fast, and some were slow. Naturally, the distance between them widened. The fastest and slowest were separated by 10,000 miles. The slowest was Yan Shangao. The fastest was the left protector Qin Dong. At this moment, 100 breaths of time had passed, and the tempestuous waves and terror in Qin Dong's heart gradually dispersed. He suddenly woke up and realized that something was wrong, so he immediately stopped. No. That guy died 1,000 years ago. He can't have come back from the dead. We only heard the sound and he didn't appear. Why are we running? After the fear disappeared, Qin Dong's mind was filled with shame and anger. He suddenly felt that he must have been embarrassed and humiliated when he ran away in fear. So he decided to turn around and go back to check. But as soon as he turned around, he saw second elder Su Zhang rushing towards him. He was still panicking and unconscious. Stop. Qin Dong's face darkened as he reached out to stop Su Zhang. However, Su Zhang did not slow down. He shouted with a face full of fear, "Left protector, run. Run my ass. We've all been deceived." Qin Dong was filled with shame and indignation. He couldn't help but curse. Su Zhang immediately sobered up. He quickly slowed down and stopped beside Qin Dong. Then 6th Elder Gushi and 7th Elder Lu Qingsong also flew over like crazy. However, Su Zhang also came back to his senses and joined forces with Qin Dong to stop the crowd. Not long after, Qinlan and Yan Shangao were also stopped. The 6 god kings regained their calm and the fear in their hearts dissipated. There was no need for Qin Dong to say anything. Everyone recalled the situation just now and felt extremely ashamed. Damn it! We've all been deceived. Kenshin is long dead. How could he appear again? That fellow just now was just imitating Kenshin's voice. We didn't even get to see him before we were scared away. Sigh. We can only blame him for being too cruel back then. He practically destroyed our 100 Refinements ancient sect by himself. That's a nightmare for all of us and we can't forget it. The faces of the 3 elders all turned green as they discussed with shame. Qinlan was also very ashamed. He said softly, I remember now. That voice just now should be Tianqing. He's the human youth who claimed to be an elder of the Jiang clan. However, he's definitely not a peak god king and definitely not Kenshin. Yan Shangao also came back to his senses and quickly nodded in agreement. Yes. It's that bastard who imitated Kenshin's voice and aura to scare us. The 3 elders' faces became even more unsightly. Qin Dong glanced at Qinlan and stared sharply at Yan Shangao. He shouted, when the sect was in trouble back then, Qinlan was out on a mission and didn't see Kenshin. However, you've seen Kenshin. Why didn't you recognize that human youth in Hengshan Empire? Why didn't you recognize his voice? The 3 elders also looked over with cold gazes, and their bodies were filled with anger. Yan Shangao felt very wronged. He quickly explained, Left Guardian. Kenshin died long ago. Furthermore, it's been 1,000 years. Who would have thought that he would appear again? That Tianqing's appearance and attire. Thinking about it carefully, he's 80% similar to Kenshin. However, his voice is still a little different from Kenshin back then. Qin Dong was not satisfied with this explanation. He was about to fly into a rage and reprimand Yan Shangao. Fortunately, Qinlan helped him out. Master, now is not the time to argue about this. Tianqing didn't chase after us. This means that he's not our match. It's also impossible that he's Kenshin. We have to hurry back in case we fall into his trap. Qin Dong glared at Yan Shangao and no longer pursued his failure. He ordered with a black face, Return with me. Finished speaking, he brought Su Zhang, Qinlan and the rest and flew back majestically. After 100 breaths of time, everyone returned to their original spot. The ruins on the ground were still there and the smell of blood lingered in the air. However, it was empty in front of everyone. Heaven's Will Palace had long disappeared without a trace. Seeing this scene, Qin Dong and the rest's faces were as cold as ice. They were so angry that they gnashed their teeth. Bastard. Damn it. We fell into a trap. Indeed, it was that brat's scheme. Damn beast. Chapter 3499. 3 days later. Tianyi Palace was like a shooting star as it sped through the clouds. Ever since they got rid of the 100 Refinement ancient sects deity kings, the past 3 days had been peaceful. At this moment, Jiang Tianyi, who was lying in the corner of the hall, gradually woke up. His consciousness was still recovering and he opened his eyes in a daze. What entered his eyes was a handsome and resolute face. His expression was calm and his eyes were as deep as the night sky. Jiang Tianyi was stunned for a moment. He moved his lips and said in a hoarse voice, Young Master Tianqing? You helped me heal my injuries and woke me up? Ji Tianqing nodded and said, Your injuries are no longer a problem. You should be able to recover after a few more months of recuperation. Thank you, young Master Tianqing. Jiang Tianyi was filled with gratitude and quickly thanked him. Then he thought of something important and asked, Young Master Tianqing, Qin Dong and Qinlan? Where are the 100 Refinement ancient sects people? Ji Tianqing shook his head and replied calmly, I got rid of them 3 days ago. They should be chasing after us now. You got rid of them? Jiang Tianyi was in disbelief and asked subconsciously, There are 6 of them and 2 of them are high-level deity kings. Especially Qin Dong, he has broken through to the 8th degree realm. How did you get rid of them? Thinking of this, he shook his head, which was still a little dizzy. The memories from 3 days ago gradually became clearer. He vaguely remembered that before he lost consciousness, Ji Tianqing said 2 sentences. It was those 2 sentences that made Qin Dong and the 100 Refinement ancient sects people feel as though they had seen a ghost. Then, without waiting for Ji Tianqing to show himself, Qin Dong and the others fled for their lives. Thinking of this, Jiang Tianyi found it even more unbelievable and was filled with doubts. Ji Tianxing did not explain and only said in a low voice, "Your injuries are lighter and you will recover soon." But Jiang Tianxing's injuries. When Jiang Tianxing was mentioned, Jiang Tianyi's heart tightened. He quickly turned his head and looked around looking for Jiang Tianxing. Where's ninth brother? How was his situation? I remember that he was seriously injured and his right arm was cut off by that bastard Qin Dong. Jiang Tianxing was already seriously injured. After his right arm was cut off, it affected his ability to wield his sword and cast spells. This was definitely a heavy blow to Jiang Tianxing. Ji Tianxing patted Jiang Tianyi's shoulder and comforted him. "I can understand your feelings. Jiang Tianyi's injuries are indeed too severe. However, you don't have to worry too much. His life is not in danger. I've already suppressed his injuries, but his severed arm can't be reattached in a short period of time." With such a powerful and terrifying team, even if they faced a peak god king, they still had the power to fight. Dealing with Ji Tianxing was simply too easy. The shadow executioner god emissary had a confident attitude and a proud smile hung on his face. He said to Jiang Chun, "There's nothing for you to do here. Bring the Jiang clan people back." Then he ordered the 24 god kings, "All god kings listen to my order. Use all your strength to capture Kenshin. You must capture him alive. Vice Commander Lord Jin Shuang will arrive soon. When the time comes we will present this great gift to Lord Jin Shuang." Before knowing Ji Tianxing's true identity, the Shadow Executioner God Emissary's goal was to kill him. But now the Shadow Executioner God Emissary changed his mind. The 24 God Kings all drew their swords and grinned coldly, about to join forces to attack Ji Tianxing. At this time Jiang Chun suddenly shouted coldly with a dignified expression, "Stop. This seat won't interfere with your grudges, but this canyon is the Jiang clan's territory. If you want to fight, please leave this canyon. Otherwise the Jiang clan absolutely won't sit idly by." The moment these words came out, the Shadow Executioner God Emissary's expression became very ugly. Clearly Jiang Chun still wanted to help Ji Tianxing. But the Shadow Executioner God Emissary also understood that with his status, the Jiang clan did not place him in their eyes at all. Unless Lord Jin Shuang was present, only then would the Jiang clan be apprehensive. Hence, the Shadow Executioner God Emissary transmitted his order to the many God Kings, "Surround Kenshin and follow him out of the canyon." But very unfortunately, the 24 God Kings were just about to disperse when Ji Tianxing's entire body lit up with white light, and he disappeared into thin air. The afterimage that was left on the spot also rapidly disappeared. The Shadow Executioner God Emissary's expression changed, and he immediately waved his hand to give the order. "He escaped. Quickly chase. No matter what, we must catch him." Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 3504. Ji Tianxing's decisive escape was within everyone's expectations. After all, the Jiang clan had submitted to the Azura God Emperor. It was clear that they would not accept or help him. Shadow Executioner led more than 20 God Kings, sharpening their swords and brimming with killing intent. In addition, Jin Shuang, the vice commander of the patrol, led a team of divine envoys. They could arrive at God's Guide Grotto Heaven at any time. Under such circumstances, Ji Tianxing had no choice but to escape. But Shadow Executioner and the others did not expect Ji Tianxing to escape so decisively. A moment ago he was still standing in the sky, motionless. The next moment he directly used a teleportation secret technique and escaped from God's Guide Grotto Heaven. Swoosh! A divine light flashed. Ji Tianxing left God's Guide Grotto Heaven and teleported 60,000 miles away. Shadow Executioner and the other Zone Lord's divine senses could detect a radius of 70,000 miles. They discovered that Ji Tianxing had escaped to the south of God's Guide Grotto Heaven. Ji Tianxing also took out a pitch-black divine sword and rode it to the south. Whoosh! He was like an aurora cutting across the sky, piercing through the firmament and disappearing into the sea of clouds. Shadow Executioner and the 20 God Kings did not hesitate. They all used their teleportation divine powers and chased south. They left in such a hurry that Shadow Executioner did not even have time to warn Jiang Chuyun. Swoosh, swoosh. After a divine light flashed, Shadow Executioner and the 20 God Kings all teleported 40,000 miles away. However, the distance between them and Ji Tianqing was increasing at an extremely fast speed. The Shadow Executioner emissary made a prompt decision and ordered, Domain Lord Qinglan, steer the divine warship and lead everyone to the south. Qingkong, Sanhe, Mingluan, 3 zone lords, follow me and chase after Kenshin. As he spoke, Shadow Executioner took out the sky-piercing hairpin. The 3 zone lords did not dare to hesitate. They quickly followed him into the sky-piercing hairpin and flew south as fast as they could. Azure Blue Zone Lord took out a mid-king level divine ship and took 21 God Kings to the south as fast as lightning. Originally, after the previous experience of killing Ji Tianqing, the Shadow Executioner envoy only brought 3 domain lords and did not dare to chase after Ji Tianqing. Reality proved that even if he caught up with Ji Tianqing, he would only be killed by Ji Tianqing. However, the situation this time was different. He knew that he was no match for Ji Tianqing, but he still took out the sky-piercing hairpin without hesitation and took the lead to chase to the south. This was because Ji Tianqing's true identity had been exposed. Kenshin. 1,000 years ago, his name had shaken the 4 continents of the divine realm, and he had suppressed numerous divine kings with a single sword strike. At the same time, he was also the Azura God Emperor's greatest enemy. Therefore, the Shadow Executioner emissary would not let him escape no matter what. Once he let Ji Tianqing escape the boundless heaven continent, he already guessed how the Azura God Emperor would punish him. Of course, the Shadow Executioner emissary had also thought it through. He would just follow Ji Tianqing and make sure that he was not shaken off by Ji Tianqing. He would never fight with Ji Tianqing. That would be courting death. Whoosh. The sky-piercing hairpin cut through the sky faster than the speed of light and soon closed the distance with Ji Tianqing. 50,000 miles, 45,000 miles, 40,000 miles. After all, it was a king-level high-grade divine artifact. As long as there was enough divine power to support it, its speed would far exceed the Sword of Burial of Heaven. After 20 breaths of time, the distance between the sky-piercing hairpin and the Sword of Burial of Heaven was shortened to about 10,000 miles. At this time, the Shadow Executioner emissary finally breathed a sigh of relief. He hurriedly said to the 3 domain lords, "The 4 of us will take turns to control the sky-piercing hairpin and maintain this speed, hanging behind Kenshin and keeping a distance of 10,000 miles from him. Everyone must remember, don't be shaken off by him, but don't try to intercept him either. With just the 4 of us, we are not his match at all. After all, he has several Divine King Realm accomplices with him." After saying that, he said to Clear Sky Domain Lord, "Clear Sky, you control the sky-piercing hairpin first. I have to send a message to Lord Jin Shuang and report the latest situation to him." Clear Sky Domain Lord nodded and complied. She hurriedly cast a spell to control the divine array and control the sky-piercing hairpin. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner freed his hand, took out a communication jade slip, and entered a message inside. "Lord Jin Shuang, we rushed to the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven in advance. We wanted to ambush Tianqing there and kill him in one fell swoop. But we didn't expect the Jiang clan to reject him and not let him enter the Divine Attraction Grotto Heaven. What was even more unexpected was that Tianqing's true identity was exposed. He turned out to be Kenshin from 1,000 years ago. He once saved the Jiang clan and has a deep relationship with the Jiang clan. Although the Jiang clan didn't help Kenshin, they also didn't assist us in capturing him. Kenshin took the opportunity to escape and I'm going all out to hunt him down." After entering the message, Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner sent out a communication jade slip. The next step was to wait patiently. About half an hour later, Jin Shuang sent back a communication jade slip. Whoosh! Spiritual light flew into the sky-piercing hairpin and landed in front of Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner. He hurriedly picked up the jade slip and read the message inside. Jin Shuang's voice immediately sounded in his mind. She was very excited. That traitor is Kenshin? So that's how it is. No wonder he was so daring and dared to go against His Majesty the God Emperor and kill innocent people. Kenshin died 1,000 years ago. How could he come back from the dead now? There must be a huge secret hidden here. Shadow Executioner, you've made a great contribution this time. His Majesty the God Emperor will definitely reward you heavily. However, His Majesty the God Emperor isn't in the God Emperor Palace right now. He won't be back anytime soon. However, there's me, Commander Qi Yan the Meng Shuai and the Imperial Tutor, will definitely capture Kenshin and hand him over to His Majesty the God Emperor. What you need to do now is to follow him closely. You can't lose him. I'll arrange the entire capture plan. Just wait for my orders. Obviously. Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner's report made Jin Shuang's blood boil. She was extremely excited. After reading the message in the jade slip, Divine Envoy Shadow Executioner finally let out a sigh of relief. At the entrance of God Attraction Grotto Heaven, Jiang Tianyi was also stunned. He looked soullessly towards the south. His expression was very complicated. Young Master Tianxing, I'm sorry. I didn't expect it to be like this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. These words kept surging in his mind. The guilt in his heart was about to explode. Along with the guilt, he was also thoroughly disappointed in the Jiang clan. So much so that he suddenly felt disheartened. Ha, this kind of Jiang clan, this kind of ancient clan. What a joke. He muttered to himself, then turned and walked towards the entrance of God Attraction Grotto Heaven. When he passed by Jiang Chuyun, the left and right protectors and the others, he said expressionlessly, "Don't worry. I'll go to the disciplinary hall to receive my punishment. I'll go to the frozen cliff to reflect on my mistakes." Everyone could tell from his tone that his heart was as dead as ashes. Jiang Chuyun's body shook. She turned and looked at his back. She sighed. "Jiang Tianyi, no matter what you're thinking, I'll tell you. The world has changed. If the Jiang clan wants to continue, they must adapt to the times and go with the flow. Even if he was at his peak, didn't he still die in the War of the Gods, let alone now that his cultivation has fallen? The 5 emperors rule the world. The general trend is set. No one can change it." You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.